Welcome, friends, it's the MovieFilm Podcast. MovieFilm Podcast, enjoy the show. Zachy and Brian are talking about the movies. MovieFilm Podcast on the radio.
Welcome to Movie Film. This is episode 300, brought to you by Mr. Toy Productions. I am Zachy. I'm here with Brian.
Hey, how's it going, Zachy? Happy anniversary. Wow.
Indeed, 300. I figure after 300 episodes, we and the audience are on a first-name basis. So that's why I just skip the last names. We don't need that.
I think we're good. Man, we had mentioned that this was coming up, but I was not mentally prepared for this as we were queuing up that this is the 300th episode. Wow.
It's a big number, and of course, if you factor in the commentaries, we're quite a bit over 300.
I'm amazed every time I look at the little vault where we keep all the commentaries, how many we have in there. It is a lot.
It's quite a wealth of just us talking. So I guess whatever value one deems that to have. I saw actually that someone on Spotify has created a playlist of our commentaries.
Yeah, I saw that.
Ken Watney, I wanna shout him out because it's just it's amazing to me, you know, that our work is deemed worthy of catalogization. Is that a word?
Yeah,
it is now, baby.
It's amazing, and thank you so much for doing that. It's very cool.
It's nice. It's nice to know that stuff is out there. And hey, you know what? 300 episodes of the regular show. I say this all the time, like sincerely. We obviously we enjoy chatting, but we do this because the feedback is always so. It feels like people enjoy being part of this little coffee clutch that we have here.
Yeah.
And that's the most gratifying thing in the world.
I completely agree. I mean, it's amazing to think of all the different eras, I guess, of my life that this has, been a thread throughout. And it's always been for me, engaging with the audience and like having this standing appointment with you, like my best friend every week, getting to talk about things that excite us. Like it's a gift. So I'm amazed we're here at 300.
In 2012, when we started, I had 3 kids, and I have since doubled that number.
Right.
So that's kind of amazing.
That is amazing. Wow, you're right. Wow.
And the nice thing, we got a fun movie to discuss today, so that kind of helps.
Yeah, I agree. Yes, if this had been, I don't even know, like, a Morbius episode or something.
Well, 300, here we go. But what have you been up to, though, since the last time we did one of these regular shows?
Oh, man. Well, I've seen a handful of things because...
before you even get to that, I mean, you had COVID over the last week or two, right? I mean, how are you feeling? Are you on the other side of it?
Yeah, I was going to say, for that reason, I appreciate you, asking. I was on that road trip, and so I think last we talked, I hadn't seen a lot because I'd been in the car for a week, and then I took 3 plane rides through 3 airports back to LA. And 2 days later, I had COVID.
So you just swam through several swamps of COVID-infested travelers.
It's funny because I don't remember the last time I wore a mask. Actually, the last time I did wear a mask on a plane, I was sick. And I tested, I had a cold, and I just felt like I would be kind of a jerk if I was sniffling and coughing next to my neighbor, and so I wore a mask. But I'm feeling a little bit more back to normal, I guess. But as I was walking through the airport, I remember, I'm not saying it's this person, but I remember specifically walking and a guy coughing, not covering his mouth, just right as he was passing me. And I was like, dude, you're a grown man. Like, cover your damn mouth. So, who knows? But
so that might well have been the one that punched your ticket for you.
Who knows? Maybe.
Well, and at this point, how many bouts have you had? Because speaking of punching tickets, I'm like, do you get some kind of a prize after you get X number? Free haircut, something like that. I don't know.
This was, yeah, or I'd love it like a shirt or something. Yeah. Or a cozy, put my drink in. No, this was 3. This is the third time for me. And I would say that each time, mercifully, they've gotten less and less punishing. Okay. But they've been all kind of the same. The first time there were several days where it felt like I was hit by a Mack truck. Like not just cold symptoms, but then you're just knocked out for a couple days.
Okay.
Second time I was knocked out for, I'd say, fewer days. This time I thought I had a mild cold. And then there was one day where I was like, oh, and I just was achy. I wished I could sleep, but I couldn't. Mm-hmm. And for, I would say, a couple days, I was so, I don't know if foggy's quite the right word, but I just couldn't focus on anything. So even though I had all this time and I was confined to bed, I didn't want to watch TV. I barely wanted to look at my phone. I didn't want to read. You have all this time available, but like my mind wasn't interested. It's a weird feeling. And then there's one day where you just snap out of it and you're like, oh, I'm going to watch TV, So I don't know. How many times have you had it?
To the best of my knowledge, none.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry to say that I think I passed it along to my brother because I was home and then I got dinner with him one night and then he got it and this was his first time. I was like, oh sorry.
Oh, Brian.
I know. I felt bad.
Yeah, I think I've been lucky up to this point. But, I've had over the last 4 years, I've had bouts of like colds and stuff. And so there is that part of me. It's like, well, maybe it is. But, I've never, I haven't hit any of those lows.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So that I'm kind of like, well, I'm not generally, I don't like being in people's spaces anyway. Like,
sure.
Like social distancing was actually great for me because I don't like being near people in general.
Yeah.
So I had like a social excuse not to, be too close to people, but that's still the case for me. So maybe I've been lucky up to this point.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, no, I do remember those, say, like 2 years or so where we were really, apart from people. It was nice not getting sick.
Sure. Oh, sure. Yeah.
Like 2 straight years without a head cold or something. That was kind of nice.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I should knock on wood right now.
Yeah. Well, I'll do it for you over here.
I mean, the other thing I was thinking, I'm just generally feeling lousy all the time anyway. So, geez. I've got aches and pains. My aches have aches. I'm kind of a mess at this point. And so I'm like, maybe I've had it and I don't realize it because I'm just in this constant state of not feeling great.
Oh man, we didn't plan to talk about this, but now I'm actually a little curious because you had spoken a couple weeks ago or maybe months ago about changing up your diet a little bit.
Yeah.
Now I'm kind of wondering how that went because I actually did the same.
Yeah.
Kind of inspired by you. Wow. And got back on the bike a little bit and I've been doing my push-ups and trying to at least set it, even as small as it is, just some sort of routine for myself and eating a little bit better. And I have to say, I've been feeling pretty good. So I was I know you're talking about the aches and pains and everything.
Yeah.
I was hoping that's
I've done my best to stick to it. I will say I was on vacation a couple weeks ago and my general rule is if I'm on vacation, I'm not going to go nuts trying to stick to it,
Oh yeah, same. I mean, when we were on the road, it's what are you going to do? It's food.
Anything goes. So I'm kind of trying to get back into the zone. But I'll tell you, I've made an effort. I've done my best to stick to it, and I definitely I feel better overall. So less lousy is what I would the category I would assign myself currently.
Great, good.
And I just gotta say, this is what people tune into the show for: 2 old men talking about their aches.
Well, since you had brought it up before, I thought, listeners might be interested. Maybe they were inspired by you too,
Jeez, 300 episodes in. I don't even remember. This is the arc of this show. We're turning into Waldorf and Statler basically from the Muppets.
I mean, it started, in early 30s. I was 32 or something like that. And I'm like, I'm going to take the world by the balls, Zachy. Yeah. And then now we're just oh, my shoulder.
It hurts when I sit. Is that normal?
Yeah. Why do I make so many noises when I move?
But with that in mind, hey, what have you seen lately?
So I've seen a handful of things, and being bedridden kind of helped with that a little bit. But I wanted to shout out something I saw a little bit ago: the Please Don't Destroy movie, The Treasure of Foggy Mountain.
Yes. Oh man, I've been wanting to see this, and it totally fell off my radar.
Yeah, well, so my buddy Michael Olson recommended this to me, and he was saying that he thought I would like it, and the reason he liked it was it felt like a throwback to those sort of '90s SNL style movies,
Right,
where they're
right.
just kind of stuffed with random jokes.
Well, and for people who may not know, Please Don't Destroy.
Yeah, sorry, they're sort of they began as like a internet comedy troupe, and they'd make these short films on YouTube and TikTok and whatnot, and then they are now on SNL, and they've sort of taken the Lonely Island mantle with the
Right.
digital shorts.
Yeah, that's right.
And so they made this movie, and he was saying it's sort of like this 90s SNL thing. And what I mean by that is, in like Billy Madison, movies like that, where it's just all these jokes, and there's like a clown, and then he falls over and he dies, and then later in the movie he starts singing, "I bet you thought I was dead, but I'm not dead." Like just these random things that would make you laugh when you were 13 years old. And that's totally what this movie is. Like it's just an easy breezy collection of silly gags that was fun to put on and just kick back with at the end of the day. I do think people's feelings about the group will probably inform their enjoyment of the movie, because I mean, if I know some people that weren't crazy about the Lonely Island, and so they would probably hate Hot Rod, you know what I mean? And so
Right.
if I found that to be the case with this movie and me, because I think when it comes to Please Don't Destroy, I'm mostly on board with them. I think I vibed a little bit more with Lonely Island, but I would say by and large, I tend to like Please Don't Destroy's sketches. And I would say by and large, I enjoyed the gags in this movie.
It is weird how there's this subtle generational shift between Lonely Island and Please Don't Destroy, where
Totally.
I think Lonely Island spoke more to our sensibilities.
Yes.
Right. And again, not to we're not that old, but there's definitely a little bit of like, oh, this is aimed at people a little younger than me. Like that was the realization I had with their shorts.
Oh, that's so funny.
And I like them. I generally laugh, but there's definitely some stuff I'm like, this, like it's sort of secondhand references and things.
Totally. Yeah. No, well, and that, again, might kind of play into how you enjoy the movie, which is to say, I think you will enjoy most of it, but maybe you won't connect with all of it. But that's also what I think is weirdly its strength. I mean, it has a story. It's about these lifelong friends that are going to hunt for lost treasure, but it's mostly an excuse to just, hang jokes on. And it's sort of like a Family Guy episode where like it's just joke, and one or two or three even might not stick, but then one comes along that makes you laugh out loud, so then that's what keeps pulling you through. And so, for every joke that whiffs, then another one comes along and surprises you with how random it is and surprising. And then it has you giggling all over again. So
where did you watch it?
It's on Peacock. It may only be on Peacock, I think.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I mean, if Please Don't Destroy is your jam, I think, you'll probably have a fun, giggly night ahead of you.
Yeah. Actually, speaking of Peacock, this is not at all similar, but there's this documentary I saw on Peacock this past week called Abused by Mom, the Ruby Franke Scandal. Have you heard about this?
No.
Man, it's so crazy. It's this story. I was like, it was in the periphery of my awareness, where it's this like parenting vlogger.
Oh, okay. I can imagine where this is going.
Right. It's like, she had a YouTube channel called 8 Passengers in reference to herself, her husband, and their 6 kids.
Okay.
And I mean, this lady's just documenting every aspect of her life as a parent,
Right.
And it was one of those things where, as it went on, she accrues all these followers and whatever, and suddenly she's giving parenting tips, and it's like really screwed up. Like it reaches the point where like, oh, my son like lost his sock, so I'm gonna have him go into the yard and he has to do push-ups
What?
Like weird, oh, my 6-year-old, she went to school and she forgot her lunch and they called me to bring her food, but since she didn't prepare her lunch like I told her to, I'm not going to take her food, and that'll learn her, basically,
Okay.
this type of stuff. And I'm like, this is like weird. Oh, and this other thing where it's like she had like this little kid who got a hold of a pair of scissors and started like cutting stuff around the house. And so she gets like a stuffed animal that this kid likes. And she's like, if you cut something again, I'm going to get those scissors and I'm going to cut the head off this like stuffed rabbit or whatever.
Yikes. Sounds like a mean older sibling.
Right?
Parent.
So that's weird, number one. But number two, how are you going to document all this, right? It's like exhibit A through K,
You're right.
So weird. Like the instinct to A, do that, and B, be like, oh, let me get this shit on my iPhone so I can post it, right?
Yeah.
And so you follow this thing, and and it ends with this lady in jail because, of course, she'd been abusive of her kids and stuff. But what it really drove home to me is this weird cultural shift we've seen really in the last decade or so, where it's this Truman Showization of ourselves.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you say, well, Truman, his excuse is he didn't know his life was being documented. Right.
Right.
And the idea of everybody being like, no, I got to do this because I'm the star of the story.
Mm-hmm.
And, like when you think about it, we all sort of think of ourselves as the main character of our life. That's kind of normal.
Definitely.
Right?
Yeah.
But the idea that you're gonna turn that into an actual performance, and you're going to divest yourself of your own privacy
and exploit people around you, especially children who have no say in the matter. It's, I don't know. I saw this video last night. It really annoyed me, where this woman was basically like, we just moved into this neighborhood. It's like text on the screen, it's like, just moved into this neighborhood and this 98-year-old man, baked a cake and delivered it. Like, I'm shook or something. And then it cuts, she points the camera at herself and she's holding back tears and covering her mouth. And all I can picture is watching her in the room, like pointing the camera at herself.
Yeah.
Probably not having tears in the moment, but having to reconjure them to recreate the moment.
Right. Yeah.
It's just so phony. I don't know.
Yeah.
It just feels so, I don't know. It kind of
it's no, you're absolutely right. It's this weird performative aspect that's taken over a portion of the population. And certainly for me, it's like, look, I've been a parent for a little while. Hey man, I have screwed up plenty, believe me,
Sure.
I know it. And I'm just like, the idea of screwing up royally, but recording that shit while you're doing it,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even understand. I don't even understand the inclination. And the other thing, the side note to this is that people like the whatever racking up, X million of followers confers an authority on these people.
Yes.
Man, you don't know anything. You know what I mean? Like,
I know. And then you think about it practically, she's probably profiting off of this, so she has to keep producing content.
Exactly.
So then you start pushing it, and maybe, things that you would not have done, you lean more into actual like abuse. It's like, well, people really respond when I chastise my children for when they mess up. And so then you have to keep coming up with new inventive ways that people will want to share what you just did.
Yeah.
And then you start, I don't know, it's like maniacal. It's weird.
It really is. And it, the other side of it is just sort of like she would post these videos and people commenting like, oh, you're going to have like pluses and you're going to have pro and con commentary, right? But the idea of being the subject of people's conversation is really weirds me out.
Right.
Like, I don't want people talking about me. You know what I mean? Like,
no, that's a good point. Yeah.
So this whole thing, so it's a fascinating documentary. It's on, it crossed my path on Peacock. Like I said, the story itself was in the periphery of my awareness, and it's not unique. Unfortunately, there's so many examples of this, and it's one of those things that just really it makes me just wonder, like where things are headed.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about this, the internet being sort of a Pandora's box and social media and all that. But I mean, this is the beginning. Like we're at the very beginning of this.
We're at the front end. Yeah.
Evolve into in like 50 years, 100 years. I'm so curious.
I say let the apes take over.
I, for one, welcome our new ape overlords.
Exactly. What else have you seen though, Brian?
I have to throw this out, even though it may be too late to really recommend. But my friend wanted to go see Twister. They put Twister and Twisters in 4DX.
Wow. Okay.
And I've seen 2 movies already in 4DX. I saw The Fall Guy and I saw The Last Hunger Games. And I don't like it.
So 4DX, for people who don't know.
Yeah, sorry. 4DX is basically when you see those 4D movies at like Universal Studios, like Shrek the Ride, and you're, on the back of a dragon, and then your seat shakes and moves in time with the picture. And then there's also water that sprays in your face when someone sneezes. And if lightning goes off on screen, there's strobe lights in the theater. So it's trying to make the movie immerse you in it, right?
Yeah.
Physically. And I just haven't really been a fan. I find it very distracting. It literally will cause you to spill your food. Like that's how much it actually shakes. And I've just found it distracting.
I saw a ride, like it wasn't even like a feature film. It was like 4DX. I forget the title of the thing, but it was basically following the journey of a drop of rain.
Oh, interesting.
Okay. So the whole thing was probably like 5 minutes.
Huh. And from what? Like from like a cloud and then
exactly. And everything that and so you're traversing everything that this drop of rain goes through. So this chair shaking and and I was like about 45 seconds in, I was like, please stop this nightmare and let me off. So I can't imagine a whole movie worth of it,
But that's what I was going to say. I was wondering if it's more about the novelty. Where it really is, it's like, it's about a raindrop and you're supposed to feel what a raindrop feels versus I'm trying to watch The Fall Guy, and trying to follow some sort of story.
Right.
And I will say that the things I have liked from the 2 movies I didn't enjoy as much were every time a character, I remember this in Hunger Games, every time a character stepped outside from a building, there'd be this really subtle breeze that went through the theater. And I thought that was amazing. Uh-huh. It really did make me feel like I had just stepped outside. And at one point it snows in that movie and they actually had snow fall from the ceiling, like soap suds or something. But anyway, so my friend was like, do you want to go see Twister? And I was like, really? Like a weather disaster movie in this format I don't really like. But I was like, yeah, I've heard it's been selling out and people are really excited about it and everything. And I just, fine. Like if you're going to do it for any movie, I guess let's see what this is about. And Zachy, I had a blast.
Really? Okay.
This is the movie this thing is designed for.
And this is the original one, not the sequel.
Yes, they were showing both. They were doing double features, but we saw the original Twister, which now I've seen that movie 3 times this year.
Yeah, wow.
But it was sold out. The whole place was packed. After it, so I mean, it rained. It literally rained on us, and it was very clever when they were in their truck. It was dry, but as soon as the camera cut outside the truck, it would start raining because the rain is like on you now because you're outside of the truck. And there was strobe lights for lightning. There was heavy wind. The seats shook, but it actually did feel like it was in sync with everything that was happening when cars were bopping through cornfields. And after each sort of, tornado hit sequence, every time the audience burst into applause. Like it just, it's like, that's why you're there versus something like Fall Guy or Hunger Games. Like you are going on a ride with this movie. And
so you were like mentally prepared going in.
I think, I think that's it. Yeah. And the movie's so darn fun. Like, as we know, we just did the commentary and everything. And everybody was laughing with the movie. That's what was cool too, seeing a movie that's like 30 some years older about, and everybody just having a blast with it still, and adding this extra novelty, which played so well with the movie. So, I mean, I don't know if it's there anymore, but it's been so profitable for them. I wouldn't be surprised if it came back, and I would actually recommend it. Twister and 40X.
There you go.
So would you, I mean, you and the kids, I bet you would actually have a fun time.
Oh, I'm sure I would. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't have to follow the path of a raindrop. So
yes, exactly.
Sign me up.
Yeah. The path of a raindrop. And then lastly, I'll mention, I'm very curious if you saw this on Netflix. They dropped an anime series called Terminator Zero. It's a new Terminator story.
I was meaning to, and then it just fell off my plate. Although I saw that they dropped it on August 29th, aka Judgment Day, which I thought was very considerate of them to do.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's, I don't know if it's created or it was the whole thing was written at least by Mattson Tomlin, who I guess did some uncredited work on the last Batman movie. And I've been saying lately a lot on this show that I've just been really starved for new Terminator content. And so I was really excited to see that this series was dropping.
Yeah, this seemed to drop in a timely manner for you considering your recent diet.
Yes. Oh, that. And also this was right when I had COVID. So I was in bed. I was like, let's go. let's binge this thing. And what I thought was really cool about it is, you know, as you keep making sequels to these movies, you have to tweak things to try to make it different. Or it's like, well, we stopped Judgment Day, but Judgment Day is going to have to happen anyway at a later date, you know, and which can work to varying degrees. But on this one, August 29th, 1997 is locked. And what makes it different, however, is we're watching that story affect different characters in Japan, in a different part of the world. Right. And so by doing that, you know, Judgment Day still happens, but we have, and Terminators come back through time and are hunting our new heroes. But by placing it outside of Los Angeles or wherever, you get these interesting new angles, like how hard it is to come by guns in Japan. Like the Terminator, where's he going to get a gun? You know, they don't just have gun shops. And so he has to come up with, you know, new weapons and new ways to innovate. So all that stuff was kind of fun. And admittedly, I'm not a huge anime person. Like I don't watch a lot of anime. And so I will say it took me a second to sort of get on its tempo because it does move at, I guess what I would assume is sort of an anime tempo. And it also felt like a Terminator story sort of meets the Animatrix.
Okay. Gotcha.
Right. So that was when, you know, the Matrix movies were at their height. They put out 90 minutes worth of anime shorts that showed the world basically leading up to the events of the Matrix, right? How things went down and whatnot. And so it was kind of interesting mixing those sort of elements and getting really into sort of philosophy. Like there's a guy who's basically debating whether or not humans are worth saving with an AI. And I have to admit, some of that stuff felt a little wheel spinny to me. Like I didn't mind it in concept, but it felt a little drawn out. Okay. But all the Terminator stuff, all the action, and some new ideas about Terminators and their relationships to some of these characters in here totally scratched that itch that I had been feeling for a while. And I think it's worth a shot for fans of Terminator.
I like hearing that.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're going to check it out?
I expect I will. Yeah. I mean, you intrigued me with the idea of like, let's look at the machine apocalypse from different parts of the world. That's interesting to me. You know, I've been watching the, you know, they got all these Walking Dead spin-off shows now.
Yeah.
Like they're doing like little mini series, like series of mini series. So they have a show starring Norman Reedus called Daryl Dixon.
Right. Yes.
With his, you know that character at least, right? And so he ends up in France. Right. And that's what pulled me in. I'm like, well, that's kind of interesting. Hey, what's the situation in Europe? How is it different? You know?
I like that. Yeah. I think that's smart.
Yeah. So looking
locations,
at it from a different
yeah.
setting, that's what kind of it makes me think of that.
That's cool. I love that. Well, and
Yeah.
I also want to mention that longtime listener and friend of ours, Doug O'Loughlin, actually he heard me saying that I was looking for Terminator stories, and he owns a store called Comic Cave in Portland, Oregon. And while I was sick with COVID in bed, this package arrives at my doorstep, and it is all 4 issues of RoboCop versus Terminator sent from Doug, because he's like, you know what? I bet Brian will like these. And
I've been telling you about that series for a long time, so that makes me really happy that it finally got in your hands.
Dude, I was incredibly touched, first of all, and also I loved it.
Good. It's so good.
It up. You know what's so cool about it is just on its face, like the title sounds silly, like RoboCop versus Terminator. I mean, I was still interested, but you're like, what's that? Like, you just imagine these 2 metal beings just sort of clanging with one another. But it finds this really cool way to incorporate who RoboCop is into the Terminator story, and melding those worlds, and the action that ensues is actually really clever and really cleverly told, right? Like all the possibilities, and it deals with things that I thought were kind of cool with time travel, where, well, if this thing happens, then pop, certain things disappear and it overrides this.
Right.
You know, so now you're dealing with this. So then someone will do that and it kind of overrides that. And there was a lot of that herky-jerky fun, I thought, with like affecting the future and the past, and then it finds really cool ways to amp things up and use all the potential of the Terminator world and RoboCop and what he could be capable of. And I had a blast reading this. So Doug, thank you so much. It meant a lot, and I had so much fun reading it.
Yeah, and just by way of the concept, you know, I think it's very clever. Basically, the TV guide logline would be that a member of the resistance in the Terminator future comes back in time to the present to kill RoboCop, because it was the technology that created RoboCop eventually led to the creation of Skynet.
Right, because he's software and sentience.
Exactly. So, talk about a brilliant hook, right? And in terms of execution, it's a script by Frank Miller, who wrote, you know, RoboCop 2 and 3. And I have my issues with Frank Miller for a variety of different reasons. But in terms of his comic book work, this is one of his better. He wrote, for those of you who don't know, he wrote Batman Year One. He wrote The Dark Knight Returns. One of his best comics, which like weirdly is not talked about at all.
Yeah.
And terrific art by Walter Simonson, who's like a legend in comics. So just a terrific. I remember when I moved back to the States from Saudi Arabia, RoboCop versus Terminator was the very first comic book I bought. It had just come out, the first issue. So I have a very specific memory of it. But it's a terrific story. Yeah.
You know what else I enjoyed about it was the individual issues. And they were from 92 or 93 or whatever it was. And on the back, there were movie posters, you know, for like Dr. Giggles. And,
Army of Darkness, I'm pretty sure is.
Alien 3, the Sega Genesis game.
Yeah.
It was so much fun seeing it.
RoboCop 3 was upcoming, so I think there's a little thing in there for like the RoboCop 3 comic book adaptation or whatever, you know?
Yeah, there was also a thing about if you go to Comic-Con, you could win a ride in the RoboCop car. So it's just an awesome little time capsule too.
Yeah, one of the best RoboCop stories, which I granted isn't saying a ton because most everything other than the first movie has been like kind of lousy, but a very good follow up. So I'm glad you got to read that. That makes me very happy.
Yeah, no, me too. How about for you?
It's been kind of a light week for me, but just with, you know, my semester has started, so I'm pretty much just chasing around all over the place. So not a lot of free time, but boy, I made sure to squeeze in that Ruby Frankie documentary.
Yeah.
I got my priorities set.
That's funny.
And of course I watched Beetlejuice, which we'll talk about in just a little bit, but why don't we take a short break? 'Cause we got a whole bunch of listener letters. We're back, and hey, like I said, the mailbag is open, Brian, and it is quite bountiful, one might say.
Let's dive in.
So here's a note we got from Mark McGee. He emailed us at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com, and he says, "Hey, Zachy and Brian, first of all, I wanted to wish you hearty congrats on your 300th show. I'm so happy I found your podcast last year and look forward each week to your funny, insightful, and joyful commentaries. Here's to 300 more."
Thank you, Mark.
He says, "I enjoyed your take on Alien Romulus and agree with you on practically every point. The film's aesthetic was great. Andy's performance stole the movie, but Ian Holmes' appearance and the third act just didn't work for me. If you edited the film down to about 7 or 8 minutes, I thought it would make a great Alien, the experience. Theme park ride."
That's good.
It had highlights from pretty much all the films: the original Alien, weapons and ticking clock from Aliens, hybrid Alien from Resurrection, and black goo from Prometheus, just to name a few. Even the Rook character was a blend of Ash and Bishop. Bishop was cut in half in Aliens. Overall, I enjoyed it, but will probably never revisit.
I hear that.
Although that movie is really performing. I saw that it's crossed 300 million worldwide.
Wow. And that was supposed to be a Hulu film?
It was originally going to be for Hulu a la Prey.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. So you talk about with Prey leaving money on the table, because that movie absolutely would have performed in theaters.
I think so. Yeah.
Although they've got the next one, they're filming whatever the next Predator is, and I think that's meant to be in theatrical. So.
Oh, good.
Mark goes on. He says, "I watched Costner's Horizon over the weekend on Max. I had skipped your comments until I'd seen it and just went back and listened. Again, I agree with your points and enjoyed the film very much. I love, Zachy, how you mentioned Centennial." That's the miniseries, big epic miniseries about the American West from the late 70s, because that is exactly the vibe I got. The film had the structure of the classic 12-hour 70s, 80s miniseries that I loved so much. Even though those had plots per se, they were really separate vignettes with many characters that ultimately were tied together, and I definitely felt Horizon fit well in that genre. I think it may have worked better if all 4 parts were shown in that format too, 1 to 2 hour segments. That said, I was never bored. It was a little darker than I expected, with some very brutal and violent scenes, but I really liked the look of it. The acting was excellent, especially from Sam Worthington and Luke Wilson, something I never thought I'd say. Some of the extended dialogue scenes were very Tarantino-esque and greatly added to the overall tension of the story. I was slightly confused by the ending montage until I realized that, again, it was mimicking the way each episode from those old miniseries ended when they showed what to expect in future episodes. Like you both, I'm really looking forward to the next chapter. Thanks again for all the great entertainment you've provided in 300 shows. Like I mentioned earlier, the joy you both have for film and for each other comes through wonderfully, which makes it a joy for us, the listeners, to hear each week. That may have been too many joys used, but you know what I mean. Take care."
Oh, thanks, Mark. Oh man, I especially enjoyed hearing about Horizon here, because I haven't been able to talk about it with a lot of people, so I'm definitely very curious in the population's experience with it, especially now that it's on Max.
It's definitely performing in terms of people watching it and rising to the top of their ranking. So there is an audience for it, and so maybe that'll help whenever the second one comes out. Although I was reading about how Costner was sort of discussing the film over the weekend, and he was like getting emotional as he's like, "Look, somehow by hook or by crook, I'm going to finish it."
Yeah, I saw that too. Did you see the responses to part 2?
No, I didn't. I've been kind of avoiding it, to be honest. What's the gist?
Pretty much the same. I mean, I would say mixed to positive. And when I say mixed, it's not that they're not enjoying what they're seeing. I think there's still a feeling of, it feels like some things are disconnected, and the movie does not give you any wrap up again. Yeah. So, I mean, to Mark's point, and yours also, it then does feel like those sort of 12-hour miniseries of the past, just in cinematic form, diced up into 4 chunks.
It's a weird situation, because the truth, and we talked about this, I think, that if Costner had taken this idea to Netflix, they would have taken it. Like, I'm fairly certain they would have jumped at it. But I feel like this is like Kevin Costner. He's putting a stake in the ground. He's like, no more. We're not
Yeah.
seeding this to streaming, you know?
And you know what? I agree with all the above. Probably objectively would have worked better as a series,
Right.
but I love it as a movie, or I want to love it once I feel like a little more completion from it. I enjoyed my time with it. I was left a little wanting. That was kind of how I ended up feeling. with
Okay.
it. But I did enjoy my time with it. And I enjoyed the elements that have been set up. I just am eager for the rest of it to feel a little bit more. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like where I'm able to sort of track where it's going. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm on both sides. Like, yeah, this probably would have kicked butt as a Netflix series, but I love Costner being like, no, this is how I envisioned it.
Yeah.
I'm one of the last people who has this kind of power, and by gum, it's going in theaters.
Yeah.
You know?
I mean, man, I want him to finish it. I want him to finish it for selfish reasons because I want to see how the story ends, but also just on a more basic level. I know what all of this has meant for him. I mean, he's had this sitting in his cranium since 1988.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, and this is the thing, right? I mean, streaming has ruined so much.
Yeah. Or disrupted.
No, ruined, Brian, ruined. God damn it! I was reading an interview with the producer of, gosh, I wish I could remember his name, but the producer of Hitman, the Glenn Powell, Richard Linklater movie, and just talking about how it was acquired out of Venice or whatever by Netflix, and they paid just an ungodly amount of money, right? To release it to streaming, and they dropped it on Netflix, and it barely made a ripple, and that was it, right? And this person was lamenting, like, you know, this movie would have been a conversation starter, an awards contender, and it just, I mean, no one's talking about it, right?
I know.
And this is the dilemma. Like, it almost feels like Netflix is. And I don't want to ascribe sinister motivations to it, but I mean, it feels like they want to kill theatrical. And if that means overpaying for these movies and just dropping it on their service, so be it.
See, I'm so torn because would we have Beverly Hills Cop 4 if it weren't?
Yes. No, come on, Brian. Of course we would.
You think?
Yeah.
Maybe.
And that's actually a good example because it came out, we saw it, we enjoyed it. But I mean, this was Brian, we're talking the weekend of Beetlejuice 2 opening to more than $100 million.
No, don't get me wrong. I definitely think this made a statement. Absolutely. Or maybe that's a bad example. Well, certainly wouldn't have had the budget it had, but
that's fair, but that's okay.
Or movies like Hitman. Maybe Hitman wouldn't have been greenlit or something. You know what I mean? Like some more,
but it was greenlit. It was purchased.
Gambles. Like people can make more gambles in the streaming space. But then what I think sucks about it is it's nice that certain things exist that probably in another timeline wouldn't. But they don't reach their audience. They don't make their impact that they are totally capable of.
Look, just using Hitman as an example, it wasn't like Netflix greenlit it. It existed as a film. Netflix purchased it out of festival, right?
That's true.
So in other words, this is a movie. I mean, it's there and people will find it eventually. But I mean, the conversation surrounding movies is so contingent on a theatrical presence. Maybe I sound out of step. I don't know.
No, I don't know. It's all weird. Everything's tangled now.
Yeah.
It's hard to untangle it. And
look,
really
not Lonely Island, the Do Not Destroy, Please Do Not Destroy movie.
Sure.
Right. Don't you think that should have got a shot theatrically?
I'm conflicted. I mean, yes, I think everything should, hopefully. And in a different timeline, maybe more people show up and take risks on things than they do right now. But I do feel like that movie is pretty niche. And I don't see that being some sort of like $80 million performer at all.
But it doesn't need to be. That's the point, right? We should have room for that
I'd love
type
that.
of thing.
I wish we lived in
right?
that world.
We should have the metrics that allow, and I know I'm not trying to convince you because I know you already agree, but like that's what's so frustrating is that we've squeezed out the spectrum of success for theatrical.
Oh, I agree with that. Definitely.
You
There's
know?
no nuance anymore for success.
Yeah. And again, I lay a big chunk of the blame for Netflix just basically bigfooting this stuff, being like, we're going to buy this movie for whatever the hell, you know, $30 million. You know, most studios are like, well, we're not paying that, you know?
Right.
And it's literally, they're paying that amount just to shoulder out these studios.
Sure. Well,
and just be like,
make people need to subscribe to them.
Yeah. You know?
But I mean, would like Stranger Things exist? I mean, I like, say what you will where it's ended up, but I mean, that was a phenomenon, but was that going to be on NBC? Probably not. They wouldn't have that cast.
Sure.
You know, like that's what I'm trying to say. I'm fumbling for like examples, but like, I
get it.
I like that they can take these different sorts of risks.
Yeah.
And not that they always do a good job with it, because then, yes, they'll have a show, they'll let it exist for 2 seasons and then just kill it because now it exists and it's there and it's volume or it's content, you know, on our servers. And that's not great either. So that's what it is. It's muddy. It's good. It's bad. It's ugly. It's all of it.
You know, I just saw an article in the Hollywood Reporter about how the number one show on streaming right now is Prison Break.
Fascinating.
Right. So I guess it just dropped on Netflix recently.
Uh-huh.
And this is a show that ended like, I don't even know when it ended, a long time ago.
Early aughts. Or middle aughts.
Yeah, that's
maybe.
Mid to late. Yeah, because they did like that revival season, whenever that was. But I mean, it's been a while.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And yet that's the thing people are watching. And obviously, you know, Suits is like legendary at this point for how that became a destination show, right? So in other words, think about it. What people like is having a big chunk of this show and being able to go through it. And we've lost that, right? Your 6 episode seasons ensure that you're never going to get these big, you know, quote unquote syndication friendly chunks of shows.
And I guess this goes to show that people will watch those.
Yes.
It's not that they don't have the attention span for something over 10 episodes.
Right. So the point, like with these Netflix shows, okay, like we talked about like with Stranger Things, they just spent ungodly amounts of money on it, and I'm kind of like, well, here's an idea: budget it less.
Sure.
Budget for TV. I saw an interview with Marlon Wayans recently, and I forget who he was speaking to, but he was talking about exactly this. He's like, look, streaming and everything is fine, but he's talking about himself. He's like, I miss being able to make shows with the target of syndication of 100 plus episodes. And he's like, he really went through, he's like, the economy of making those shows was self-sustaining because you get to a syndication number and then you're able to sell those reruns get paid X amount for reruns. And it's what keeps it going well into the future. Well, streaming has cut the legs out from that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the network seeded the ground. They're like, you win.
Right.
They're the Vichy French, you know. It's like, man, stay and fight, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's interesting to your point. I mean, with Prison Break and Suits and, you know, Friends and Seinfeld continue to be performers.
Yeah, Fresh Prince.
Prince. Yeah. I don't know. Or you know, another movie too. I remember was I Care a Lot. With Rosamund Pike. And I remember watching that. It was a Netflix thing, I think. And I was like, it really hit me. You know, it impacted me. I was like, wow, that was a movie there. And I thought, this is dark. It's a little, you know, whatever it is. But if this had been in theaters, I feel like at least for a little bit, people would have talked about this. This would have been in conversation. But I bet most people don't even know that movie exists.
Yeah.
You know, and so would it have existed? Would Warner Brothers have made that? I don't know. But it also then, you know, the monkey paw thing is it does exist, but does anyone know it exists? You know?
This is my, I mean, at this point, having witnessed now longitudinally the way streaming has really it's already dealt a body blow to network television. It's not doing much better for theatrical.
Mhm.
Like the industry has to fix itself.
Yeah.
You can't just because here these tech bros have come in and now they're pissing on this is my turf.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They screw up everything else. They've screwed up human interaction thanks to social media and everything else.
Yeah.
Now they're doing this. I don't know, Brian.
I don't know. I really, I mean, I have to say, we'll get to it, but with Beetlejuice, I was very encouraged for many reasons why that movie succeeded the way that it did. I think it speaks to a lot of things I'm hopeful about that success. So,
right.
You know.
I mean, look. Here's another example. You got Wolves that's coming out soon.
Yeah.
Right? George Clooney, Brad Pitt, directed by John Watts, who did the most recent Spider-Man films. That is not. It's getting a cursory like 1 weekend theatrical release, but it's in essence it's a streaming original. And I'm like, why? Why do that? Why give up? That's a movie that
a last minute change too. Like that.
It was.
I don't know what maybe it's like tracking or something. Like, why would they pivot so late in the game?
Well, it's because Apple is realizing they've just been throwing money at these movies that have both a theatrical and a streaming release, meaning, Killers of the Flower Moon and Napoleon about a year ago. Which, let's be real, those movies were never going to play beyond a certain metric for success. So they should have been budgeted accordingly, right?
Right.
But this is a movie. I mean, first of all, I read that they got paid just obscene amounts of money, so it drove the budget up, which, okay, that's a separate conversation. But my point is you create a package in a way that is financially feasible. You put it out to the theater, you take your chances.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, I just read that supposedly that Pitt and Clooney are in the mix for Ocean's 14.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, one presumes that's going to be a theatrical release.
I would have to imagine.
Right? And I don't know about you. I want to watch that.
Me too.
I would absolutely watch. I've been kind of hoping we'd get some kind of Ocean's legacy sequel. It sure beats the shit out of, hey, let's do a prequel of with the what is it, Ryan Gosling and Margot Robbie.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Although I have to admit that was one of those like kind of things where it was supposed to be like it's set in the 60s.
Yeah.
So it would be a 60s caper. And I have to admit, Ryan Gosling, Margot Robbie, 60s caper, I'd watch that. But it's too bad that it has to, if it's going to exist at all, it's like, well, what can we connect it to that people already know? It's an Ocean's movie. That's
so
kind of
dumb. It's so unless it's about the sperm that will become Danny Ocean escaping from Ryan Gosling's balls, not interested.
Wait, what?
That's the Ocean's prequel. That would be interesting. It's like an animated, like what's that movie with Bill Murray?
Oh, Osmosis Jones?
Osmosis Jones, but it's like the sperm that will be Danny Ocean.
Actually, I would watch that. And it's
That's
like a heist.
Caper. Yeah, it's like a heist movie about getting out of Gosling's balls. I'm interested.
I'm intrigued. I'll go that far. Oh man. What's crazy?
You see where my mind goes when you say Ocean's 11 prequel. That's where my mind goes.
Right to Ryan Gosling's balls and animation.
Yeah, of course.
Well, real quick, because I'm just curious what you think about this. So,
but actually, real quick before you even move on, isn't Danny Ocean dead in that Ocean's 8 movie that they did a couple of years back?
I watched that movie. I remember her sitting outside of some sort of like grave situation, but I don't remember if it was alluded to that was a ruse. I don't remember.
Yeah. Okay.
I remember there was a cameo, and I don't even remember who that was. All I remember is they have a situation with magnets, and Rihanna's character goes, "Oh, my sister's a whiz with magnets." And I was like, what is this movie?
So now it's Ocean's 9, but not really.
I don't know. No, that's a good point.
Yeah, there is a cameo from one of the original peeps. Oh, it's the acrobat.
Man,
You should know this, but-
I remember thinking Anne Hathaway was very funny in that movie. That's literally
Yes.
that,
That's
and
the
the
only thing I
magnets is
remember.
the only thing I remember.
Well, anyway, so Ocean's 14 going to theatrical. The Ocean's prequel. I don't even know how far is that for sure happening, or was that like one of those like as a concept that's being putting out there, or has it? Do you know anything about that?
It's hard to know, if that's just something that they're trying to package and so they put it out there and try to sort of will it into existence, or if it's actually in active development. I don't know. But it's interesting, this Ocean's 14 thing, right? The director, who was it? It's a guy who did kind of like a artsy film, Edward Berger, who did All
Yes,
Quiet on the
that's
Western Front
That's right.
and Conclave, that upcoming movie about the popes, and which he seems like very visually inclined. So that's kind of, I mean, so is Soderbergh, right? And there's a lot of
Soderbergh is
style to those Ocean movies. So I'm very curious what this guy's style would bring to the series.
Man, Ocean's 11 is so good.
I saw that movie again, sort of on accident in a hotel room on cable. Just stopped on it, and I watched the whole thing. It's so good. Totally holds up.
Did it make you want to rob the hotel you were staying in?
You know what's funny? I was in Vegas.
There you go. Where you're like, let's do this. You know?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it does. It makes you want to get a team and have everyone be an expert in something. And
You couldn't find anybody, so you were playing all the roles, which is what got you into trouble.
yeah, it's like me trying to
The
be
Chinese
all
acrobat.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, trying to flirt with waitresses to like get inside scoops, and they're just like, ugh. No, I'm not George Clooney.
That's the problem.
Yeah, but
yeah, I hope that movie happens. Anyway, it's in the very early stages, but I'm absolutely on board for that.
yeah, because I feel like why I want to say this is there are certain movies where you go, oh, seriously, a fifth one? Why? But when I hear this one, I think, oh, cool, because I don't know, it's a fun vibe, and I feel like heists. If you can come up with a new heist, it's like Indiana Jones. You come up with a new artifact, new locations, new challenges.
Yeah.
A tone that you like. Well, sort of like a Bond film or Indiana Jones or whatever. Well, then that feels like it's designed then to place those characters in different sorts of fun situations, and it won't hopefully feel super repetitive.
Yeah,
And why are we doing this?
And plus, I mean, we're not like precious about the original those three, right? I mean, we're like, no, they're good. I think most people like the first and third one better than the second one, but it's not the same as for example, when Crystal Skull came out. It's like it has to live up to this very, very high standard. Like they're all fun capers, and you're like, hey, that was fun, and then you move on.
Kind of like Mission Impossible. Just
Like
keep
Mission
coming
Impossible.
up with new stunts and new MacGuffins, and I'm going to show up if I can continue.
Find
to be
new
thrilled.
things to drop Tom Cruise off of, and
Exactly.
We'll make sure you catch him, and we'll be in good shape.
Exactly.
Here's one last note we got. We actually just got this mere moments before going live, Brian.
Huh.
And this is from James Reed in regards to our commentary track for Beetlejuice, the 1988 Beetlejuice.
Oh, wow.
And he says, just finished listening to your Beetlejuice commentary, which I really enjoyed. I've always loved this film and first saw it as a teenager shortly after release, although on a sleepover rather than theaters. It really served as my introduction to Tim Burton as a director, whom I've followed avidly ever since. And in fact, it was through watching Tim Burton films, this and Batman 89, that I really started for the first time to understand how the director could influence the film and what it meant to be a Tim Burton movie or a Steven Spielberg movie, etc.
Totally.
I've always thought the marketing was a bit off, though, and didn't really communicate what the film is about. It seems to pitch it as a straight slapstick comedy, e.g. the tagline, "The name and laughter from the hereafter," which certainly featured prominently in the UK. However, the reality was much more nuanced. I rewatched it just now and really appreciated how fresh it still looks. I've not seen the sequel yet, but I hopefully will catch it soon. Also, wonder if you knew quite a strange bit of trivia. For a long time, the Journey to Atlantis ride at SeaWorld in Florida would play a segment of the Beetlejuice score as you moved between sections of the ride, after the initial show scenes and before a drop. No one knows why this was there, and it didn't really relate to the theme of the ride at all. However, a few years ago, they did a hatchet job on the ride and stripped all the show scenes and story out. And when they did, so the music was also removed.
Huh.
There you go. Thanks as always for the podcast. I love listening to every episode. Well, thank you, James.
Thank you, James.
I guess it just points to the utility of plugging in Danny Elfman music in the most unforeseen places, and somehow it manages to work.
Yeah, definitely set a mood for sure.
That it set the mood for the movie, like we talked about during our commentary.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
It has been fun over the last week or so in the lead up to the release of this new film to hear from people who've loved it all their lives, the original one, but also there was a whole bunch of people who saw it for the first time and they had kind of this revelation, which has been equally fun for me to see. Yeah,
I mean, going to the first thing you just said, we have like our sort of movie friends that follow this sort of thing. And even, on Instagram, I follow my movie theater and they're all about the popcorn buckets, the Dune popcorn bucket, the Deadpool popcorn bucket and whatever. And you usually see that only amongst these sort of film people things on Reddit or Instagram or whatever. But it was fun this week on Facebook. I was seeing a lot of people I went to high school with who I don't ever see post movie or entertainment related things. And they were all like, got my Beetlejuice popcorn bucket. Like it was very cool seeing how excited all sorts of people were.
I didn't know there was a Beetlejuice popcorn bucket, to be honest.
Oh yeah. Oh man, I've been wondering about that lately. I'm curious for people who are listening if they get excited.
That's actually really cool looking. Wow, I just Googled it.
Oh, dude, they ever since the Dune thing, like Furiosa, almost every movie has a themed bucket. And the one with Beetlejuice, they had the snake, and then they also had one that's the handbook for the recently deceased. Yeah. And I saw all sorts of people in my screening with those buckets. Like everybody was buying into these things. So I was like, this is like a cool boon for theaters to find a new, way to make some more money.
Yeah, I remember going to see Deadpool and Wolverine. Like it was like the opening day, or like, it was like the Wednesday like the fan screening or whatever. And there was a sign up that was like, only one popcorn bucket per customer. And there was a line literally going out the door.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, well, goddamn.
It's pretty cool. Pretty clever.
Hey, if it's getting people in theaters, nothing wrong with that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming this stuff is going for a pretty penny on eBay. I'm assuming.
I would have to imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. But very cool. Thank you for that, James. Why don't we take another short break? We got some headlines to discuss. And we're back, and here's some sad news to start things out. Unfortunately, in this one, it took the world aback. It feels like, everyone sort of had to take stock of themselves for a moment when this news came across. I don't know if you got that sense.
Absolutely. No, this was so surprising. I mean, of course, we're talking about the passing of James Earl Jones.
Which surprising. I mean, he was 93 years old, so not a surprise in the sense, I mean, that's a long, amazing life. But I think we were just like, no, James Earl Jones is eternal.
It felt that way.
Right?
Right. I mean, and he's one of those people, I guess, when I think back to even sort of the 90s when I was a kid, of course, Darth Vader. But when I would see him in things like The Sandlot or something, he seemed like an elder figure in there.
Yeah.
And for him to still be around and still voicing Darth Vader, like you say, it almost made him feel kind of eternal.
Yeah.
Like he was just always going to be around. And like you were saying, immediately, just everywhere, I was seeing just an outpouring of people putting up little tributes on social media and whatnot. And he's, I mean, certainly for our generation and beyond, I mean, he just touched.
I mean, so many generations. That's what's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. And for a character, that's the thing too. I'm always amazed when you hear there's people who haven't seen Star Wars. The thing that I always hear is, I haven't seen Star Wars, but I know everything. Right? Everyone knows who Darth Vader is. If you heard a voice clip of Darth Vader, even if you hadn't seen Star Wars, you'd go, oh, that's Darth Vader.
Yeah.
Like he created a character that will live for as long as, characters can live.
Right.
Or brought it to life, I should say. You know what I mean? Like it's I don't know. It's a voice that rumbles in your chest when you hear it and evokes so much. And that's just, it's funny because that's what he's probably most known for, but he's done so many things. I mean, that when I started thinking about it all, like I said, The Sandlot meant a lot to me, and his reveal at the end, even though he's only in the movie for a couple minutes, makes, the whole movie have even greater impact when you think about the scary yard they were about to enter. And then it's this kindly James Earl Jones figure next door who's happy to talk baseball with these kids, and Coming to America and Field of Dreams, and Mufasa, for goodness sake.
Mufasa. Well, that's I was thinking first a couple things. Just by complete chance, this past weekend there was like a Star Wars marathon on TV.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I watched part of it.
And so of course A New Hope was on, and it happened to be right at the start, and it's the very beginning, when Darth Vader comes through and he's choking Captain Antilles, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm just listening to it, and I was thinking, just completely random, I was like, this scene, which I've seen God knows how many times, and I'm just like, what a voice. Mm-hmm. What a voice. How did they somehow manage the perfect voice to go with that face? And then 2 days later, he's gone.
Yeah.
My hand to God. I was having that conversation with myself.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was thinking, if nothing else, and we don't, it doesn't need to be if nothing else, but just Star Wars, just The Lion King means that we human beings will be hearing James Earl Jones's voice for the rest of history.
Yeah.
For the rest of history. Think about that.
As long as there's media.
Right?
Yep.
I mentioned his passing yesterday in class to my kids. And Darth Vader. Mufasa. The Sandlot. Like all the generational touchstones.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
But what the other thought I had for his very first credit was, or screen credit I should say, Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah, I saw that in an obituary. I didn't recall that. I've only seen that movie once, to be honest. But
I remember very distinctly because I watched that movie in film school, and my teacher had pointed out this is James Earl Jones' first movie that he ever did. And I think he was the last surviving cast member of Dr. Strangelove.
Oh, wow.
Isn't that something?
Yeah. Weird. Thinking of generational waves sort of linked with one another, and then you lose another link.
Just sort of like the touching hands across the generations,
Exactly. Yeah.
But Conan the Barbarian, which I don't think you've seen.
Still haven't seen. Yeah.
I'll tell you, man. He plays Thulsa Doom. He's the villain in that movie, and man, the intensity, And it's such a unique choice, by the way, to cast him in that role. And the way the character is visualized, but it's and I don't want to forget The Great White Hope, which is amazing.
Right.
Matawan from 1987, amazing. Cry the Beloved Country.
I was going to say, Great White Hope was a role he originated on Broadway, right?
On Broadway,
he was an EGOT winner.
Yeah. In addition to that, he guest starred on just so many different things. And it was just his ability to just pop up on a TV show or whatever. There's this terrific episode of Frasier that he guest starred on, where he plays this elderly man in an old folks home who is blind. And Frasier has this interaction with it, and it is hilarious. I don't want to spoil it because it's just very funny, but you realize how, just his presence. Here's the extraordinary thing. He was both intimidating and just warm, and loving,
Right.
And he could just navigate that so seamlessly.
Yeah. I mean, for me, when I think of that, I think of something like The Sandlot, where it's like he can be this scary, like, who's out there in my yard? And then I remember his giggle, when he's recalling his glory days playing baseball and being so happy to tell these stories to the kids. And it's just, what actor can pull off of both of those things?
Yep.
Your scary neighbor, and then the neighbor that you look forward to seeing every morning and talking baseball with.
Yeah, and I sent you a clip from The Big Bang Theory.
Yes.
That he guested on. And Big Bang, that's not a sentence I usually say. I don't usually share clips from The Big Bang Theory because it's not a show I find particularly funny. But it's Sheldon happens to see him at a restaurant. And initially he's like, "You must be here because you like Star Wars." And he's like, "I love Star Wars too." You know,
Honestly, I found it weirdly stirring. Like
right?
it was very like it should be included in any sort of clip package they have with him. But
I
seeing
agree.
him like light up like that in his booming voice, yeah, where he's playing intimidating at first. I guess you like Star Wars, but then he seems so joyful. I like Star Wars too, and just hearing that come out of his voice is it was moving to me.
Yeah, what's been really speaking of moving is seeing all the tributes paid to him by so many prominent black actors.
Mm.
Because when you talk about somebody who really paved the road,
right?
You know, not just in how to act, but how to be, you know, sort of the dignity that you embody.
Right.
You know, I like LeVar Burton on Twitter. He said there will never be another of his particular combination of graces.
Huh. Wow. Well said.
and I saw Wendell Pierce, who, you know, of course, you know, such a, like one of the great actors today, you know. And he, for me, I think, you know, he played Jim Greer on the Jack Ryan television show.
Right.
Which, of course, James Earl Jones originated in the Jack Ryan movies. There's one little connection between them. But Wendell Pierce said, "This man was the living embodiment of artistry, integrity, creativity, and dignity. James Earl Jones is the sole reason I became an actor. He stirred a vocation in me that gave voice to my unsung heart songs. By example, he led me on the exploration of my own personal humanity and the study of human behavior in others and the intangible, ever-present soul. He was a once-in-a-generation talent that has left an enormous legacy in American culture."
Well, first of all, I need to become friends with Wendell Pierce so he can leave some words when I pass for me. But no, that's beautiful and so true.
It's. I mean, I always say this whenever we mention the passing of these giants, and gosh, it feels like we do it more and more. You know.
Yeah.
And that's just comes with living, I guess. You know.
You know what though? I like what he just said, where he said about legacy, because when I saw that he was 93, you know, a lot of times you see people and you think like, oh, you know, cut, you know, like in their 50s or whatever. And it's just so like what did we not see that they could have given us? And in 93, we're obviously sad to lose him. But my first thought was, what a legacy. Like a full life lived, obviously a huge impression made on so many people, and just a legacy of work left behind for people to just continue to pour over and enjoy. You know, I saw it as a wow, what an amazing life to have lived.
Very true. Yeah. If not for him, perhaps most important of all, we would never have known that we were watching CNN.
That's right. That's right. That makes me think of that Simpsons moment.
Oh yeah.
You know, at least seeing the jazz man's face in the clouds, sort of like Mufasa, but then it's all James Earl Jones characters. You know? I am your father. This is CNN.
James Earl Jones, he will be missed.
He will be missed. Yes, and well, I mean, we should say, being the huge Simpsons nuts that we are, I mean, he voiced on The Simpsons multiple times too. I mean, he had that amazing. Right. He was in the first Treehouse of Horror where he was narrating the Raven. Edgar Allan
Poe's
Poe's
the very first one. Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, he will be missed.
One more passing that happened actually the same day as James Earl Jones, but I did want to note it. Comic book artist John Cassidy, at 52 years old after an illness, and even if you don't know the name, which I suspect, you know, many of the people listening to this show may not, his work was something whose impact had been felt thanks to just the way in which it was utilized for pop culture. So he had been a comic book artist since the late 1990s. Probably one of his early marks that really made an impact right away. He presided over a reboot of Captain America, or a restart of Captain America, where he redesigned Cap's costume to look somewhat more realistic. So this was kind of John Cassidy's approach. Is he tackled things from more of a photorealistic perspective and treated costumes as as clothing and drapery and sort of how they would how approximating how they would exist in our world.
Right. Yeah, I'm
And-
looking at it right now. It's
Yeah, I don't think
very
you
cool.
get the MCU's Captain America without John Cassidy
Yeah.
paving the road. He also did a redesign of Wolverine and the X-Men in the mid 2000s, which, I mean, you look at the costume Wolverine wore in Deadpool and Wolverine. I mean, that's the John Cassidy design.
Oh wow.
So kind of remarkable, and of course, he co-created a terrific series called Planetary, and he did a reboot of the Lone Ranger, which was just terrific. And he, when Marvel regained the Star Wars license in 2015, 2016, he was the first artist on that run. So that's that at least those initial issues I know you read, Brian.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Tremendous artwork.
Yeah, absolutely.
And 52 is just far too young for, we talk about the legacy you leave. That's a situation where I look at, I'm like, man, decades of work we won't see.
Yep.
From a singular talent,
Yeah.
And by all accounts of everybody who knew him, just a very kind, giving person, which as we always say with this stuff is kind of the most important thing, at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
It's, over the last week or so, I don't even know how it happened, but my YouTube algorithm has fallen down into the in memoriam tributes from various awards shows.
Right.
Over the past like decade.
Huh.
So you hit play on these and you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot that this person is gone,
Yeah.
And really it's just like sort of the weight of talent, and obviously this is not unique. I mean, this has been going on since forever, but really just to see so many of these tribute reels in rapid succession, you're like, my goodness,
Wow. That's so interesting. That's I haven't even thought of that as something that could show up in your algorithm. I'm sure it will now because I'll probably look it up and start watching them.
Yeah.
But it's it's funny. I don't know if this connects, but I was in a town with Sean, our friend, when I was helping him move across the country, and in their neighborhood, I was in the car with him and one of his children, and we were passing a cemetery, and one of the kids was saying that they didn't like the cemetery, like they don't like cemeteries.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I kind of do like them because when you walk past and you see a name, you just think, well, who was that person?
Yeah.
And I try to kind of imagine like, well, they must have been from this town, and did they walk this street? And like, it sort of brings people back alive for me. And so likewise, what you're talking about with these tributes, it's kind of nice to rewatch those and remember those people and remember the impact that they had on your life.
Yeah.
No, it keeps them alive.
I think you're absolutely right. Yeah. And I think the perspective you shared vis-a-vis cemeteries, I think that's the wisdom that comes with having a couple more years under your belt.
I totally agree. Totally. Right. I'm sure when I was a kid, I was like, I don't want to walk past there.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I had a similar experience, this past month when I visited Chicago, and for the first time, I went to the graveyard where my grandma is buried. She passed away a couple of years ago, and I had a very similar thing where you're kind of just going among these markers, and you see the years, and you're like, man, like what things did they experience? What did they see?
I know it's I sometimes I'll think like they had a best day of their life, or like they had a worst day of their life. Like when I'm having the worst day of my life, and then you keep going. It's like a collection of things, and you look at all these people who have passed, and they had those same things, just in a different time.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the best day of one's life or the worst day, let's talk about the trailer for the new movie Saturday Night.
Yeah. Have we brought this up yet?
We mentioned the movie in passing, but we have not discussed it full on, certainly after the trailer was released.
Yeah, so this comes from Jason Reitman, who co-wrote it and directed it, and it's basically, I think it's in real time, like the 90 minutes leading up to the first episode of Saturday Night Live in 1975.
The first SNL. So like I said, it was either the worst day or the best day of Lorne Michaels' life.
Well, according to the trailer, it looks like it was at least the most stressful.
So Yeah, I kind of, we've talked before about the one for me, the one for them approach to filmmaking, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like Jason Reitman did a couple of them Ghostbusters movies,
Right.
which obviously there's a little bit of for him too, but so that he could do something like this.
Yeah, and I tend to like his movies. I think there are a few I haven't seen, but I've brought up Tully a lot as liking that one, young adult. Was it Up in the Air? He tends to have a sort of a gentle touch. There's sort of like a lot of humanity and heart to the movies that he does. And certainly, I mean, we've spoken a lot about what big fans we are of not just SNL, but SNL lore history.
Yes.
And
Right.
so, I mean, this is like right up our alley here.
It was, first of all, it was very cool to see so many aspects of the production that I'm familiar with just because I have read up on it. And it's like the weaving of fact versus mythologizing, because obviously not everything could have happened within those 90 minutes.
Right.
But the other thought I had, I don't know if you feel this, when I saw Gabriel LaBelle as Lorne Michaels, I was like, good. Like, I'm glad to see him doing this stuff.
I totally agree, because he was as far as I know, last seen in The Fabelmans.
Yes.
Playing essentially a young Spielberg.
Yeah.
And he was incredible in that movie. And I remember there were a couple moments where you'd see his face and you go, well, I'll be darned, he looks like Spielberg.
Yep.
And then in this trailer, you're like, well, I'll be darned, he sort of looks like Lorne Michaels.
Yeah, I was like, so is this going to be his niche? He's just going to star in as younger versions of famous creative personalities.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, well, he's very good at it. But it makes me happy.
I think he's going to be starring in a James Earl Jones biopic now. So that one might break the streak. I don't know.
His first controversy.
Oh, by the way, speaking of James Earl Jones, how could we not mention Soul Man?
That's right. You're right.
Respect.
Soul Man.
Anyway,
yeah.
Go on.
Do you think we're the only outlet that has referenced Soul Man in his obituary?
I want to see that, like the C. Thomas Howell, like the tribute, and it's just a picture of both of them, and C. Thomas Howell in his Soul Man get up. And people like doing that. No, don't.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, no, I mean, going back to Saturday Night. I mean, Gabriel LaBelle, very cool, very happy for him. He's two really impressive roles at a young age. But then, I mean, this movie, I think part of the joy of it, besides recognizing things and knowing maybe part of the history of it, is seeing all the actors who've been cast to play so many famous figures.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, obviously, Belushi and Garrett Morris and like
Dan Aykroyd, Chevy Chase, Gilda Radner.
Yeah, and it's funny. I mean, the Chevy Chase. I'm trying to look now. I don't know who's playing him, but it's funny. He doesn't necessarily look one-to-one with Chevy Chase, but when he behaves like him, you're like, holy crap! Like
he definitely has that magic asshole ingredient that that's so essential in the mix.
Yeah, it's pretty good. And even the Aykroyd looked pretty good, and so. And then Cooper Hoffman, I forgot, who was in Licorice Pizza. Philip Seymour Hoffman's son plays Dick Ebersol. So
I saw that.
Yeah. So I mean, speaking of like an up and comer in these kind of amazing roles with great directors, and see where he's going.
Yeah. So and for those who don't know, Dick Ebersol was the NBC executive who, after Lorne Michaels left, he took over the show for like 4.5 years.
Yeah.
So also an important part of SNL history. Like I said, I want a whole franchise of Saturday night movie, but it'll be every episode ever made. So
A movie about the lead up to each episode
of every single episode. So we'll watch Gabriel LaBelle like age in real time up until
yeah, and so we'll actually get to see the dramatization of what led up to the fart face sketch, the infamous fart face sketch.
or like pick specific episodes, like the Sinead O'Connor episode, or the
that would be amazing. Yes, or like the Steven Seagal episode, which by and large started as one of the worst hosts.
Franchise, baby.
I think you're onto something, Zachy. All right, I want to be EP on this.
The Andrew Dice Clay episode. What's another? The one where Adrian Brody was doing the Rasta thing for some reason. Like,
yeah.
You just cut to Gabriel LaBelle on the sidelines, like, "What's he doing?" or whatever.
Not again. Yeah. How many times can this thing happen to one man?
So when does this one come out?
I want to say October.
All I see is like
October 11th.
October 11th. Oh, we'll be talking about it.
Definitely. Actually, I think there's some sort of, I don't have it in front of me, but some sort of platform release happening where it'll be, New York, LA, then limited, then a full rollout. So I'm not quite sure what that is, but
yeah,
I see October 11th.
Okay, there you go. This movie, by the way, also stars Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, getting a lot of Dafoe these days.
I know. Well, speaking of him, why don't we take a short break and we'll talk about him some more right after this. And we are back, and you know who else is back, Brian?
Who's that, Zachy?
Why, it's the ghost with the most. It's Beetlejuice.
Zachy, no!
Uh-oh. Hey, how you doing? Man, Beetlejuice is in theaters this weekend, and boy, I am gobsmacked. It is opening to $110 million at the domestic box office. You know what? I'm gonna put it right on Front Street. Would not have expected. The third biggest opening of the year, behind Inside Out 2 and Deadpool and Wolverine.
Incredible. And I mean, I said at the beginning of the year this was one of my most anticipated movies because for two reasons. One, I just want to see something like this, inventive and imaginative and weird again in the theater. But most importantly, I want to see Tim Burtoning again. And it feels like a lot of other people did also.
You know, what's crazy to me is that The Flash last year opened to about half this.
Incredible.
Right? And that movie was largely sold on Michael Keaton coming back as Batman.
Yeah, that's true. Right?
Because they had to keep Ezra Miller kind of out of the marketing fray. So if you would have told me back then, almost double the people are going to want to see Michael Keaton return as Beetlejuice, I would not have believed you. Not because I don't have a great deal of affinity for that movie, but I mean, I genuinely was like, yeah, Michael Keaton is Batman. It's Batman, for goodness sake.
Yeah,
would not have believed it. But it's doing well. It's playing multi-generationally, which is really cool to see. And I can speak to this a little bit because I watched it, yesterday in prep for this episode, and I was just going to take one of my kids, and all of my not the little infant, but all the other ones are like, oh, we want to go. So everybody was on board, having just rewatched or watched for the first time the original film last week. Everybody wanted to see it.
You know what I love? I've been listening to some podcasts that have been covering Beetlejuice and just looking at the history of the making of and things like that. And it's just, for a script that back in the 80s, people were like, what the heck is this?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're never going to make this. This is too weird. We don't get it. For it to have not only been a huge hit in the 80s and lasted all these years, to be beloved, but then to have a sequel come out 30 some years later and have, like you say, multi-generational people show up for this thing. Isn't that such a testament to, like, it doesn't matter how weird something is. If it's appealing, it's appealing.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean you always have to understand it, but sometimes there's just something, there's a little sparkle to something, and you just have to trust your gut and go, I know it doesn't make sense on a piece of paper, but there's something to this. And you know what I mean? Like, I think it bothers me that people are so into how something looks on paper or polling, or, you know, audiences aren't into movies that feature this sort of thing. Like, this to me proves you can't pin that stuff down.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Well, I think, you know, we've had plenty of conversations over the last several years about legacy sequels and what you keep, what you change, and all the, you know, what does it take to make a successful one of these, right? And it's tricky, right? And I think when I look at Beetlejuice, I mean, not to bury the lead, I thoroughly enjoyed myself.
I did too.
I had an absolute blast. It was, and by the way, it was Saturday afternoon. It was in the IMAX. The joint was packed, man.
Mm-hmm. Same for me.
Right. So I was like, man, there's some kind of zeitgeisty thing happening here, which I think is really fun. But what struck me is, look, this is 36 years later. The first Beetlejuice ends well enough where it didn't demand a sequel. Right. And so it was perfectly fine being one and done after all these years. And that was what intrigued me, is I think Tim Burton, more than anyone else, knew, like, I don't need to do a Beetlejuice sequel.
Mm-hmm.
So if there is one that we're going to do, we should make it worth our while.
Right.
And that's what was always struck me. I think when we started talking about this, I'm like, what is the thing that got Burton and Michael Keaton to come back?
Mm-hmm.
And I think they found a really interesting way of honoring the first film, expanding the mythology.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It fits so comfortably within the world of that movie. It has just enough nods, you know, the member berries and all that stuff. Right. And it feels completely of a piece. You know, this is not, at least for me, it's not, and I don't mean to pick on Crystal Skull, but, you know, Crystal Skull, you watch it and it feels like Spielberg is struggling against the Papa Spielberg of it all. He's trying to get back into that frame. And it doesn't always work. You know what I mean?
Totally.
It's like, no, this is Tim Burton's old suit, and he fits into it very comfortably.
I think that's exactly it. I mean, you look at a lot of these legacy sequels that haven't worked, something like Dumb and Dumber 2,
mm-hmm.
you know, or like the Coming to America, or even the Mary Poppins, which felt a little sort of, I don't know, just whatever.
Yeah,
you know, right. It's like the problem is trying to recapture the magic of the original. And Dumb and Dumber, they just felt a little too old, and it was kind of sad watching them behave that way. You know, It's like kind of, you can't go back kind of a thing. And Mary Poppins, it just felt too modern. And there's something about the inherent charm of the older one, and Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke. You just can't do it again. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I think they found a way, or most recently when we were talking about Terminator Salvation, and I was saying that sequel doesn't even resemble the two films that came before, the classic films before that. Like, the world doesn't even look the same. I can't even link them in my mind. That's right. And this one, they found, story stuff aside, they also, your point is so great. Like, it looks like the older film. Yeah. Like, they didn't decide, well, we have all these new tricks, so let's just fill it with new tricks. They're like, no, let's get puppets. Let's build these crazy, weird, tactile sets. And to me, it felt like almost a lost movie from the 90s. In the best way. You know what I mean? If you had told me this was a movie that they forgot to put out, but they made it in like 1995, I'd believe you and be like, that's awesome. You know? Mm-hmm. And I think, they didn't try to push it or change it or strain to find the magic. They just did what they did again. And I think it doesn't always work, but in this case, I thought it did.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, we've got enough of these legacy sequels that we can sort of pick out the ones that are effective and the ones that aren't. And we can start looking at commonalities. You know, off the top, like you and I, we both liked the new Beverly Hills Cop. Mm-hmm. I think Top Gun Maverick is probably one of the best of these legacy sequels. You know, and what you see is, and I would include Beetlejuice as an example of really, like, they've put thought into what do we keep, what do we change, how do we address the stuff from the previous film in a way that doesn't undercut it or undermine it, right? That's the stuff that is really important. Mm-hmm. And with this one, like Keaton, he gets top billing, right? Mm-hmm. Kind of interesting. Jenna Ortega is the width. Which I
that's right.
And yet the proportion of Beetlejuice relative to runtime is, you know, somewhere in the vicinity of the original one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's smart. You know what I mean? Like there is more Beetlejuice, but it's not an overpowering amount of Beetlejuice. It's the right like this is something you say all the time. He's an ingredient in the stew, and if you put too much, you might lose some of that magic.
Yeah, and it seems like they were aware of that. I mean, that was
Yes.
Like Keaton has spoken about that. That was almost a stipulation for doing a sequel. It's like, well, then he doesn't become the main star. He still needs to be this, sinister thing on the periphery of a story that's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is smart. Good restraint.
I also think this stuck out to me is this felt like a movie that's not just a sequel to the original film, which of course it is, but it also is inclusive of the cartoon show and the musical and sort of just the right. So in a weird way, it's kind of like a Ghostbusters 2 type thing.
Oh, interesting. I haven't seen the cartoon in a long time. Can you expand on that a little bit?
I think the characterization of Beetlejuice was obviously very much of a piece with the first one, but also in subtle ways, he felt like the more lovable version from the cartoon. And it's subtle, and maybe that's me because I have been rewatching that show recently. My daughter, she's 7. Boy, I'll tell you, she is full on Beetlejuice mode right now.
Really?
She watched the first movie, she loved it, and then we started watching the cartoon, and so she's like, "Oh, I want to go see the new one." Right, and she's like so on board, and I was like, "Man, wouldn't it be funny if this is like her like goth origin story?"
Yes,
like,
you know what I mean? Totally.
Yeah. So that like it felt inclusive of the kind of pop culture footprint of Beetlejuice in the last 36 years, which stretches above and beyond just the first movie.
Yeah, I can see. There's a couple things I want to cite, but that'd probably be spoilers. But yeah, it's so well. I've this, but I actually got to see it as a test screening back in February, and it's been really hard sitting on this for so long because I really enjoyed it. And I really wanted to talk about it with people. And people were asking me, did you like it? And I was like, well, yes. But then I was worried all these months later if people would see it and go, that was terrible. I was so curious.
He got massacred in the notes process after all the screenings. And
well, either that movie. Or, I mean, it just, when you do a sequel like this to a beloved movie that's been around for decades, you just run the risk of it not living up to the movie in your mind.
Sure.
Right, and so, I mean, just because I had that experience, I guess it's worth mentioning. Seeing it back in February, you get these like emails that these things are happening and you're showing up, and usually it's a mishmash of people, and some people don't even know quite what they're going to see. But what was unique about this one was people were walking in wearing Beetlejuice shirts, Beetlejuice backpacks, for a test screening. And when Jenna Ortega's credit showed up, the theater cheered. So that was my first inclination, like, oh, this is going to be big.
Can we talk about that for a second, by the way? The fascinating, like, Jenna Ortega to me is the most organic stardom growth I've seen in the last decade,
Totally. Yeah.
Just this it's like she has become, I think she's been very smart about the projects she's chosen. But she has become, I mean, she is a genuine big name. She is a star, and certainly in her age group, I mean, she stands apart. And I think she is a butts in seat star. And that's sort of fascinating to me.
Yeah, she feels like she has that thing that not every celebrity gets, where people feel like they can maybe relate to her or identify with her or something. And that's really special. That's how you really get people to follow you anywhere.
Yeah.
I thought she was great in this.
I was gonna say that, and I was like, she's terrific in this. And boy, does she! I mean, granted, she's already in Wednesday. That's a Tim Burton joint too, right? So
yeah, which I haven't seen, but this made me want to watch it just to get a little more of this.
Yeah. I mean, she just fits seamlessly into the Beetlejuice milieu,
Yeah. But something I do want to mention, because I have seen, I would say most of the reactions I've seen to this are positive. But I have seen some people bring up, if they were to have any critiques at all, is that there are a lot of threads.
Yes.
And that maybe not all the threads get the weight or attention that people would like.
My kid said that actually.
Well, and I kind of agree because it's funny when I saw the early version, we can get in specifics after the spoiler thing, but when I saw the original version, I had 2 notes that I kind of emphasized, and I still had those notes.
Interesting.
After this version. Although I think one of them was
Ryan at your peril, studios.
Yeah, right. But I mean, it's funny because I just wanted to bring that up because I think those are valid. I do think this is a movie with a lot of ideas, and some of them I felt like I was more invested in than others.
Yes.
But there's something about the shagginess of this story that almost feels kind of similar to the first one in kind of a way where the first one's kind of a shaggy story itself. I think another difference, and I don't know if you felt this, the first movie from the start is wacky. I mean, you introduce the normal lives of the Maitlands, and then they're killed right away, and they go to the waiting room, and you're getting a lot of afterlife stuff and wackiness in the real world. And this one actually takes a bit of time in the real world, and there's some real world story drama happening with Winona Ryder's character and Justin Theroux's character. And it actually, I was a little surprised how long it took to get into the afterlife of it all. And I really enjoyed, I would say, Jenna Ortega's journey. Her thread was probably my favorite thread. And I think Winona Ryder's thread, with this sort of romantic relationship with Theroux, but she's kind of not sure she's feeling. I wouldn't have minded a little more something to that because there is a lot of that sort of relationship drama in the first half. But then the movie in the second half kicks off into all the Beetlejuice wackiness. And it's like, then you're off to the races and you're just so dazzled and having so much fun that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It becomes the sort of like the first film where we're just seeing all this new inventive, fun, wacky horror as comedy stuff. And to me, it did all wrap up by the end. But I did find myself in the first half occasionally sort of wanting a little bit more out of, I don't know, maybe even the character of Lydia a bit.
It's tricky, right? Because you have to give Lydia some kind of an arc. And I think the problem is that she doesn't have a lot of agency in terms of the relationship in particular, which obviously that's with Justin Theroux. I mean, and we're in this situation where we as the audience are reflexively on her side, as Jenna Ortega, as Astrid is not a fan, she says alleged mom on her caller ID, right? And we're like, oh no, but she's Lydia, we love her. And I think the problem there is the source of their separation, like their emotional separation. I would have liked a little bit more time spent on that.
Totally agree. Agree.
Like they tell us kind of, we get the gist of it and it's fine. But I think I would have liked a little more on that because I think it would have made their coming together at the end more meaningful.
I agree. Even though I did we'll get to that, but I did like what happened.
Yes.
But I agree, like pumping that up a little bit, I think would have been nice for all the characters.
Yeah, I think that when I think about it, I think it was maybe not a mistake, but I maybe dwell a little more on Lydia's relationship with Astrid's dad. And the idea that that's a wound that they're both suffering from.
In different ways.
Yep. And we don't get that sense really because and I don't know why they did this. Lydia's like, oh, we were already, like, we had fallen out of love long before we separated or whatever. And I'm like, why?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I'm not sure what that decision was.
Yeah. So the story is credited to Seth Grahame-Smith, who got involved like more than 10 years ago, and Al Gough and Miles Millar, who created Smallville. I don't know if you know that. And the thought I had is what we're seeing is literally a story created by two different writing teams.
Yeah. That's
stitched together like Monica Bellucci in this movie.
Yes.
Yes. I would not be surprised at that because the Astrid story specifically involving the boy that she's into, it feels completely separate from the Monica Bellucci story, which I'm sure we're going to talk about that in a second. And so it's totally one of those things where I'm with you, where I think it all comes together to a point where I'm like, well, it's fine, but definitely it's very busy. There's a lot of story, maybe too much story, but I guess given the choice between too much story and not enough story, I guess I'll land on the side of too much story.
I think we're on the exact same page. Yeah, it's I had that feeling both times. A lot of story, wish some of it had a little bit more weight to it, but once it kicks into gear,
yeah,
I find it super fun and weird and one of a kind, and I walked out with a huge smile on my face.
Well, there we go. I think we should talk some spoilers.
Let's do it.
Spoilers.
So one thing I want to say, right? This isn't even a spoiler, but the movie starts and Danny Elfman's music kicks in and we see that font. Boy, I'll tell you, that made me happy.
Dude, you could feel it in my theater. Like people were, I don't know, it was gasping or there was a buzz.
I got to be honest. I was so wishing I could know what my daughter was feeling. Like, you know what I mean? Like because she's watched the first movie, she's watched the cartoon, and she's ensconced it. Now here's a brand new thing, and there's that music I know and everything. I was like, man, what's she thinking? You know? I was wondering about that. And that's the other thing. This is the best kind of family movie. It's like a little kind of like scary in quote marks, but not really. You know?
It's like gross, but it's cartoon gross.
Cartoon gross, exactly. You know?
Yeah.
Like even when that little baby Beetlejuice monster shows up,
yeah,
it's like kind of cute, you know? Like
yeah, exactly.
You know? So Monica Bellucci, let's talk about her. That's definitely the thread of plot that is the most undernourished.
100% agree. And she is so cool. I mean, the whole thing with her.
This is like, you already know the next big cosplay sensation at Comic-Cons and stuff, right?
Hey, dude, she was a Halloween costume the moment she spilled out of that box. I mean, it's like this beautiful woman in this cool black dress with staples across her face. I mean, she's instantly iconic.
Yep.
And so I was looking forward to the idea of having Beetlejuice have a threat at his heels while the whole story was playing out, but we don't really get that. Like, she just kind of is there in the background, and then she shows up at the end to be thwarted.
And the why, right? Like, why is she so, like, what specific? I guess Beetlejuice is the guy who killed her initially, so she wants revenge, I guess.
Yeah, right.
But
right.
I mean, give us more than that. Like, why is she so hell bent on what's the actual? What are the stakes here? You know?
Yeah. Whether or not she wants him for love, and that's going to keep him from what he really wants, or getting into the real world through a marriage with Lydia, or if she wants to kill him. It just felt a little undercooked for, especially as cool as she is already as a character.
Yeah.
I did want a little bit more from her. And I also think if Beetlejuice has business throughout the movie, it's cool having someone nipping at his heels as he's trying to do that. And I thought they could have pushed that a little bit more.
I agree. Yeah. But I will say the storyline with Astrid and the boy, first of all, surprised the shit out of me. I didn't see that coming.
I wrote that down. I'm sorry to talk about such from the point of view of this test screening, but like, that was what I put on my card. I was like, that was my favorite moment. Like when I realized that they were floating and you're like, whoa, he's dead. I was completely shocked. I loved the reveal that he killed his parents.
Yep.
You know, when you see them sort of busy in the background, sort of like absent-minded parents, but then when they turn around and they have those, things in their faces, I was like, I love this. This is like the right kind of sinister for this movie. And knowing that he's going to manipulate her and take her life to save his, that was my favorite thread in the film.
It was a great twist, and again, it's like just this side of scary. When we see the parents with that stuff in their faces and stuff. Ugh.
Oh yeah, so good. And then Lydia realizing it too, talking to that real estate agent.
Yep.
When she's like, "Oh yeah, the murder house," and she's like, "Excuse me, what's the address of the murder house?" And it makes sense that she would see the boy because she can see ghosts. It's like the perfect way to cover it.
Yep.
Yeah, that was I loved that stuff.
See, so all that stuff it tracked for me. The I should say the Delia story, I actually thought it was like really sweet at the end, where she's like not horrified to see Charles.
Yes, when
She's
he's
happy
half a corpse. Yes,
and she just goes off with him. I was like, that's so sweet.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? I was like, because we have this impression of her, she's so selfish or whatever. It's like, no, she really loved Charles. That's like really sweet. I don't know,
Yeah, no, I love that. And I guess we should talk about that. I mean, the way that they get around having that actor back in, Jeffrey Jones, because of his real life, I don't know.
Well, I was thinking about this. I was like, they still use his likeness, so he still got some money out of this.
That's where it's weird. I've seen people talking about that. I don't know. I mean, yes, I guess it sucks that he might see any profit from this, but as a way of connecting the story, I sort of enjoyed the claymation.
Yeah.
Like you don't actually bring him back.
Right.
But you show what happened to him through this little claymation vignette. But
yeah.
So it is a nice way to tie it all together, and seeing his face does make you understand, oh yes, right, the husband, and like you said, maybe helps with the connection at the end, remembering those characters, seeing them together, that they're in love now in the afterlife. But yes, you bring in the real world stuff, and it's you don't want to think about him making money off this movie.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
it's tough.
I mean, I guess that stuff aside, what did you think of that vignette?
The animated portion?
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was fun. It's so Tim Burton,
I loved it. I thought it was so funny that the plane crashes in the ocean, and she's like, "Oh, he died in a plane crash? Oh, no, he survived the plane crash.
He's eating my shark." Yeah.
Oh, and then the shark comes up and eats half his body.
Yeah. And actually, just as a vehicle to get the story going, I think that works. I think it's effective. And then, of course, the idea of Lydia now being in the position with her daughter as Delia was with her stepdaughter. Obviously, that's a nice. We sort of see their relationship mended as well.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that all being said, we're talking around friggin' Michael Keaton.
Yeah, right.
As Beetlejuice, and you talk about. I mean, he's in his mid-70s.
Yeah,
and he does not skip a beat.
Dude, it's funny that this comes up a lot where everyone is like, "Did you know that?" Gwen Stefani is the same age as Wilford Brimley was in Cocoon. Like it's this weird measuring stick. Did you know X, is whatever with Wilford Brimley in Cocoon?
It's always Wilford Brimley, poor guy.
Yeah, and the poor thing, he was in his early 50s, which is just crazy. But yes, thinking of someone. So my point is, when we were younger and you think of someone in their mid 70s, you have a certain idea of what they're capable of, and he is. I don't feel like he missed anything. Right? Like in terms of energy, performance, he was bopping around, all energetic and still like a live wire. I thought he was fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, he just slipped seamlessly back into the character.
Yeah. There's this moment that's in the trailer, and it cracks me up every time. And it's where he draws that little bomb with the wick. And he lights on the wall, and he lights the wick with his thumb. And then there's this, he like backs away from it and stands next to Lydia. And he just has this completely dumb, amused smile on his face. And it cracks me up every single time. And I just love like his whole station at the moment too. He has this office full of those shrunken head guys as his workers, running his business. And they become sort of like minions for him a little bit. Like they can't really talk, but they run around and have funny expressions. And then when they're running around this, like they get into the real world, and they're running around the town. I don't know. I thought all that stuff was super fun.
And the Justin Theroux character, a master code breaker, Justin Theroux. I thought he was like a douchebag throughout. Right. But I kind of love, like, he was like, I love that you kind of don't know what his deal is necessarily, and then he kind of, thanks to the truth serum, he just said it's all out, everything. Like,
Yeah,
and they do that. It's almost like just in time for us to be totally fine with him getting killed horribly.
totally. Totally. I think you hit on what I was feeling and not quite locking in on yet, which is I missed a little more agency from Lydia, even if
Yes.
she's struggling or confused or a little lost.
Yes.
But that said, so that thread for me, I wouldn't have minded like a little this or that to it. That said, though, Justin Theroux, I thought he was really funny.
He's
like all
hilarious.
his line deliveries,
Yep.
he was very funny.
Yeah, the whole thing about Lydia, like that's sort of what's interesting to me is like, who is Lydia Dietz 36 years later,
Mhm.
And yeah, she had, it's kind of a fun ability when you're a little teenager, but what does it do to you,
I love that moment at the beginning when
Yes.
she freaks out at the show and she's in the bathroom and she
In the
sees that
bathroom.
woman with the knife in
Mhm.
her head.
Yep.
I wouldn't have even minded a little bit more of that. Like, it's like there are these people, almost like she's the kid from The Sixth Sense.
I was
but
going to say
it's-
she's Cole. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like, so she's taking these pills so she doesn't see these things anymore.
Yeah, like I think it's the whole it's interesting in that the relationship with Beetlejuice, like this is what I mean about the cartoon. It's like it's a sequel to the movie where he is the a negative force, and yet in the cartoon show it's Lydia and Beetlejuice having all these adventures, and how do you merge that?
Mm-hmm.
And they kind of do, where it's like their relationship in this one is a little bit more comical. It's
Yeah,
it's
they're
less
working
creepy.
together for a common
Yeah.
goal for a while.
It helps she's not a 15-year-old girl, so that helps obviously.
Definitely.
And the fact that like they give Beetlejuice the hero moment where he gets rid of that kid,
Mm-hmm. Yes.
right?
Yeah, that was what I was referencing before spoilers when you were talking about the cartoon. Seeing him in a costume,
Mm-hmm.
looking like a ticket taker,
Yep,
doing something to help our heroes. That felt
Exactly.
a little bit more like the cartoon.
that's what it felt like to me. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have expected this, but I was kind of curious about the loophole that sent the Maitlands on their way,
Yeah, it is like almost literally hand wavy,
right?
because I mean, you have the Astrid character like, well, that's convenient,
Right?
and I mean, she's referring to her mom, right? Being able to see ghosts and no one else can,
Right.
or that relationship that, they went away. I can explain it. You wouldn't, it's only something that I understand. And she's like, well, that's
Right.
convenient, but it almost, you could see it on a meta level. Like, oh, okay, well, that's why Gina Davis knocked Baldwin right back.
That's right. I will say, you talk about member berries and stuff. There's definitely when she takes the tarp off the model, and it's like, that's the model.
I had that feeling too.
It's like in Jurassic World. Remember when the kids are walking through the remains of the visitor center?
Yes.
You're like, the visitor center. I was like, the model.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, just thinking of the model now. That was so funny. Beetlejuice singing Richard Marx.
Dude.
Like
A lot of funny music. The musical number at the end was terrific, I thought.
yeah, so much fun energy and just weird. I don't know.
Yeah.
And Willem Dafoe.
Oh yeah, we nearly talked right past Willem Dafoe.
I just love the concept of that. Like this actor from some 70s kind of cop TV show, and now he wants to really be that guy in the afterlife. And he always has his assistant handing him a cup of coffee. I thought that was so funny.
Was so funny. That cracked me up.
Yeah, and then it's just when everything comes together at the end, and he gets to storm the church, and like it just, I don't know. Like we were saying, there's a lot of threads, but it's very satisfying when they all collide at the end.
Well, and I mean, what is Tim Burton if not just a ball of idiosyncrasies, right?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, that's his appeal. I mean, if what we've seen again and again is when he's forced into a predetermined studio box, that's when his films are less effective,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so the only reason to do a Beetlejuice 2 is for him to just kind of do what strikes his fancy, right? And you'll either like it or you won't.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what this movie shows, right? I mean, circling back to what we were saying at the very start of this, Beetlejuice has been a one and done for more than 30 years, and that was just fine. So if you're going to come back to this world, do something that speaks to the specific voice of the filmmaker, and I think that this movie accomplishes that.
I know. I mean, this was the wish I had. I wanted another pure Tim Burton movie, and this feels like a pure Tim Burton movie.
I think with an opening like this, especially after the summer that Warner Brothers had, they're going to be just chomping at the bit for another one.
I want it. I'm nervous.
Yeah.
Because this is 30 years worth of ideas.
Yeah.
But of course I want it,
Again, kind of the same drill where if they want to leave it here, I'm perfectly fine with that. If you've got a story worth telling, then by all means. But if don't do it just to chase that opening weekend.
Completely agree. And just let Burton do his Burton thing. If he's got some idea or something he wants to comment on through his own unique vocabulary, great.
What do you think of that ending, by the way? The whole montage, and then we see Astrid marrying that guy and all that. Is that a peek into the future, or is that just a total misdirect?
Oh, was it all a dream?
Yeah,
kind of, because that's how it ends, right? It ends up with Winona Ryder waking up, and that is a great point. I guess sitting here now in this chair, I'm starting to think it was all a dream. Sort of like her wish for
Astrid to get married and whatever.
Yeah, and have a life and be happy. I think why I didn't. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's left deliberately vague, and that's the only reason I ask. I'm just curious.
I was going to say, because the reason I didn't think that before was the whole thing where she sees the boy dressed like Dracula, Astrid. It's kind of filmed from her point of view, like the camera's close on her. Is close on Astrid's face and on the boy and everything. So I was taking that as something that was happening with her.
Right.
That
was my
thought. Point.
That was my thought. That was the exact reason. There's no shift to Lydia's point of view except when we're in the delivery room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm just curious. I mean, it doesn't matter. I'm just curious.
Yeah. No. Something else I want to comment on, speaking of those characters, is when they're reunited with the dad. I think we were talking about it when we were doing our Beetlejuice commentary, but Tim Burton, for as macabre as he can be and quirky and whatever, he also has a lot of heart in his movies, almost surprisingly. And I found it was the perfect Tim Burton-y scene with heart, in that we get Astrid is reunited with her dad, who she's missed so much, but he's covered in piranhas.
Yeah, he looks like Stellan Skarsgård in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, where he's Orlando Bloom's dad.
Yeah, right.
That actor, by the way, Santiago Cabrera, he was on Star Trek Picard. He was one of the regulars on that show.
Oh, okay.
And so I've liked him for a little while. So I was like, oh, hey, it's him. And it was nice to see him. And I loved Astrid being able to get closure.
Yes.
But I think I would have liked a little bit more between him and Lydia.
I completely agree. I remember thinking that too, and I'm glad you sort of crystallized it in my mind, where why have that they weren't together when he died?
Right.
Because then it could make that catharsis feel a little cleaner or something in that moment. Yeah. But yeah, going back to what I was saying, I just love that he walks up to this sweetness that I was feeling is very palpable. I was so happy seeing Ortega smile and look at her dad, and he's just like, "Oh, it's so good to see you." But then you had the fish like, fluff, 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 fluff. Like, right. Like it's like the sound design reminds you that this is really funny. Like the squishiness of the fish that are attached to his body. I loved that so much. I do. I wish, I think also the way that Tim Burton captures things, he doesn't do a lot of dolly ins to people for emotion and those sorts of things. And so he didn't push it as hard as he possibly could have, but I still feel like I felt emotion during that scene. It was sweet seeing at least Astrid and her dad reunited.
Well, that's kind of the thing. Like, I can sense that he probably had to balance, like, it can't be too gross looking.
Yeah.
Like, so much so that it's a distraction.
Right.
So it has to be kind of cartoonish, you know?
Mhm.
You know, that's
so
a tough.
funny.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then,
yeah.
well, we talked about Delia and Catherine O'Hara a little bit, but like, gosh, dude, she's a national treasure.
I was so happy she's in this. Really, it made me so happy, and they give her so much to do, and she gets to be so funny. She gets to be kind of her quirky modern persona, the Schitt's Creek persona. You know,
totally Maura. Yeah,
yeah. But again, just I was genuinely, I just thought that end was so sweet.
Yep.
You know, like, oh, they're reunited. Like, I don't know, it's like bittersweet, you know, but sweet.
Yeah. It's funny because it was one of the smaller moments, but the moment that made me laugh so hard was when at the funeral, that Reverend comes up to her and is trying to comfort her, and he's basically saying this really prosy, flowery sort of poem about life moving on into the whatever, and it's just so many words, and then basically she just looks at him and goes, "What?" Something about that just cracked me up.
I also love that Deo was the funeral song.
Right.
That's great. A lot of people are going to be.
There's just all
so
this,
many references.
Yeah, just inventiveness and color and crazy costumes and puppets, and the way that, you know, when Monica Bellucci would suck souls out of people, and they turn into this rubbery sort of puppet thing that, like Danny DeVito, when he'd, you know, and just get plopped onto the ground. And it's just I don't know, it just felt so refreshing to see something so different.
It's just so different. That's really it. Yeah. And I have a feeling a lot of people are going to be downloading MacArthur Park this week.
Yeah,
I think that's going to be getting us a lot of replay all of a sudden.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. My friend I saw it with, Anna, she leaned over and she goes, "Is this a real song?" And
okay.
I said, "You know what's funny? A, yes, but B, I know the Weird Al version better." Jurassic Park. So I was like, "So take that."
I think me too.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Oh man! Anything else that we wanted to cover about Beetlejuice?
No, I think that's about it. I mean, just man. I mean, if you're into this, if you're into Beetlejuice and Tim Burton, I mean, this just feels like a gift. Honestly, you know, just to get to see something like this and have it, like you say, if it sits comfortably beside the original, at least in terms of aesthetic, you know, and puppets and tactility and stuff, and that's just like, I mean, that's exactly what I wanted. And I had a great time. And the people I saw it with, we all walked out with smiles on our faces and enjoyed it. So I hope everyone else does too. You know, I mean, I know it's hard when you have a sequel to something that's so old. Like I was saying, it may not be the movie you have in your mind. So, you know,
I think that given that Labor Day signals the end of summer movie season, this is not a bad way to start fall movie season.
Totally. Oh, I wonder. Yeah. I mean, you know, Twisters, which I saw still in the box office top 10, still performing. It's been out for 8 weeks.
Yep.
That's an eternity in this day and age. Yep. And it's already streaming.
Yeah.
So it makes me wonder if this thing will play through Halloween.
Yeah, I just saw a thing saying, "Oh, they're going to release it on streaming in October." And I'm like, I mean, maybe, but like, why put that out right now? Because like you've got some runway with this one.
I know. I mean, if they want to put it out on Halloween or something, maybe.
Right. But
fine. Yeah, don't cut into, I don't know, for theater's sake, for your sake, you know, like just let the thing play as long as it wants to play.
That's right. I agree.
Yeah.
Well, those are our thoughts on Beetlejuice, but hey, maybe you disagree. That's fine. You can email us whatever your opinion is at moviefilmpodcast@gmail.com. You can also hit like on our Facebook page, facebook.com/moviefilmpodcast, and message us there. If you're looking for me on social media, you can find me at Zacky's Corner. That's ZAKIS Corner. You can also find my reviews and writing at the San Francisco Chronicle and the Wrap, and occasionally at IGN. What about you, Brian?
Episodes I've written of Young Jedi Adventures are available to stream or watch on Disney Plus and Disney Junior.
And I will add, the episodes Brian has written of Puppy Dog Pals are out there for your viewing pleasure as well. And those hold up to repeat viewing because my kids love rewatching them.
Oh, really? I love that. Yeah, I loved working on that show. That's those characters are so fun. So I'm really happy to hear that.
But if you like what we're doing, please go to Apple Podcasts and leave a review, leave a star rating. Every little bit helps. And with that, on behalf of my partner, Brian Hall, my name is Zaki Hassan. This has been Movie Film 300. Here's to 300 more and beyond. Thanks, everybody.
Welcome, friends.